Hey guys, and welcome back to RIA'S Autism World. Please give my video a thumbs up and subscribe to help my new channel out. I've decided to do a small video series on piercings and what it's like to get them when you have autism, and give a very honest opinion. I've noticed that a lot of people with autism have piercings on social media, so I thought this would be a good educational video to help you decide whether or not to get pierced if you're nervous or undecided. I have 10 piercings altogether, which includes 3 earlobes on each ear, so 6 in total. My navel, my nose, my helix, which is my upper ear, and my tragus. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to prepare for a piercing. First of all, take as long as you need to decide on the piercing. Look at photos online, which includes Google Images, Pinterest and Instagram. And only get pierced when you're 100% sure. Never rush into it. It's taken me 10 years to decide whether or not I want a rook, daith or conch piercing on my left ear. And I've always been undecided due to them being notoriously angry piercings. So I've never gone through with them, as I cannot make that final decision. Being autistic means that getting a piercing means new sensory overload. Before going ahead with this big decision, try out a cuff, clip-on or sticky gem. This way you can test whether the style suits you and whether it causes any sensory discomfort. Now, I'm going to be brutally honest in this video that if, say, one day in the future you no longer wish to have piercings, or maybe it doesn't heal and you're forced to remove them, the holes can sometimes be permanent. If you're bothered by tiny hole scars, I definitely do not recommend getting pierced. I took my lobe piercings out as a child due to sensory overload, and even to this day, over 20 years on, I still have a tiny weeny little scar where the original holes were, which, yeah, I can still see today. My helix piercing became infected and never healed after nearly 2 years. I am now left with permanent thick scar tissue behind my left ear. So I don't know if you'll be able to see in the video, it's kind of hard to show you, but you can see how thick the cartilage is on my ear, and that is thick scar tissue where my piercing was overhealing, and it just never healed. And I also have like a permanent hole or like a scar on my just about here, but I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the video, which is left over from the piercing. My original nose piercing was done too high and I was never happy with the positioning, so I decided to take it out after a few years of having it. So it's left me with a small hole that never closed up, so I will try and show you in the video. So yeah, you can see here the hole, which to me is like permanent scarring on my face. So yeah, that is definitely something to consider if you ever decide to have a nose piercing. Some people's piercings close up and leave no permanent scarring or marks, but just from my personal experience, it has left me with some small scarring. Okay, so I should point out that people love talking about horror stories in certain situations, and piercings can be one of them. The chances of anything terrible happening are extremely, extremely rare, and the stories you read online are probably over-exaggerated or probably even fake. Or they got pierced with a gun. Don't do that, people. I'll explain why next. So, for example, my mum was like, oh, you're going to get blood poisoning if you have your belly pierced. And then when I got my helix or upper ear pierced, she was like, oh, your ear's going to collapse or you're going to end up with a cauliflower ear. The likelihood of anything bad happening is probably like 1 in a million. This next step is so important. Never get pierced with a gun. Otherwise, you could potentially run into some serious problems later on. It causes blunt trauma to the piercing site and is not a safe procedure. Lobes are okay, but it's still recommended that you go to a piercer and have it done with a needle. I got all 3 lobes on each side done with a gun and they all healed fine, but I've heard that it can still be unsafe in some cases. A good way to get a piercing when you have autism is to plan. Would you feel better going with a friend perhaps, or maybe on a specific day, like maybe a payday treat or to mark a milestone event? I do not recommend getting a piercing over Christmas, on your birthday or on holiday because you just don't want to be dealing with pain over those times. This step is extremely important as a top-rated piercer means a better likelihood of your piercing healing correctly. Make sure to Google or ask by word of mouth where the best piercer in your local town or city is. Even if it's dearer, it's worth paying the extra for good hygiene practice. A new piercing is a big commitment. You will need to look after it by cleaning it with sea salt water twice a day for about 3 to 6 weeks to help keep it clean to avoid getting an infection. This can be hard to fit into a routine when you have autism. I know I really struggled with this. You will also need to baby your piercing for at least the first 3 weeks, as it will be sore and tender, and any knocks to the piercing site will just make it angry. Now, I said at the start of the video that I was going to be brutally honest, and getting a piercing does come with the risk of developing a minor problem, and I've experienced 3 so far. My first helix piercing never healed after 2 years. I was in pain for 2 years trying to just hopefully make it heal, and I just tried everything. I tried changing the jewellery, I tried looking after it with like treatment, and nothing made it heal. I was just in pain for 2 years, so I decided to take it out, and I was left with some scar tissue. And then my tragus piercing became infected once I changed the jewellery, and I was on antibiotics, and then thankfully it did clear up and I was able to wear jewellery in it again, and I was able to keep it. And then thirdly, every piercing that I've had so far, except for my lobes, I've had hypertrophic scarring, which is in the piercing world can sometimes be mistaken for a keloid. It's basically like a lump that appears on the piercing site, and I have to treat it with alcohol swabs. And after a couple of days, it usually clears up and the bump disappears. I've recently had one inside my nose on my nose piercing that I got in April. Now, this is very important for people with autism thinking of getting a piercing due to the sensory side of things. Research whether the piercing you're planning on getting is an easy healer or angry. For example, the lobes are the easiest to look after and the easiest to heal, whilst I've heard piercings like the rook or dafe are very painful to get done and very angry healers. This might not be the same for everyone, but it definitely swayed my decision not to get an angry healing piercing. Okay, so this comes to the end of this video. I hope you found this advice helpful. I'm planning on making a series of piercing videos, including my experience with each piercing, the pain level for each piercing, healing pain, and sensory discomfort with every piercing that I have. Please remember to subscribe so you don't miss these videos. So that's all for now. See you soon.